My name is Elowen Pierce. I am 32 years old, and I still remember how every sound in the conference room seemed to amplify when my boss Nathaniel pointed at me. Everyone here is valuable to this company, except the failure in marketing. The declaration hung between us like a physical presence while 30 colleagues turned to stare. Their laughter bubbled up, some nervous, others genuinely amused. Each chuckle another needle under my skin. 5 years I'd given to this company. 5 years of arriving before the morning light touched the windows and leaving when security did their final rounds. I sat motionless, my professional smile frozen in place as Nathaniel continued discussing quarterly projections as if he hadn't just publicly decimated me. The presentation slides blurred before my eyes, but I refused to blink. Blinking meant tears, and I wouldn't give him that satisfaction, not when I'd already given him everything else. Before I tell you what happened next, could you please take a moment to think about a time when someone took credit for your hard work, or when you were made to feel small in front of others? I'm asking because what I'm about to share isn't just my story. It's about what happens when people underestimate those they step on to climb higher. What you're about to hear changed not just my career, but my understanding of power itself. I never planned to work at Altitude Marketing Solutions. Fresh out of business school with a marketing degree and ambitious dreams, I'd aimed for the creative agencies downtown. But when the economy took a downward turn, I grabbed the first offer that came my way, a junior marketing position at a mid-sized firm with a decent client roster and promises of growth. My first impression of Nathaniel Crawford wasn't negative. As the marketing director, he had an easy confidence that bordered on charm. He wore tailored suits, quoted business books in meetings, and had an impressive way of making CEOs feel understood. "We're building something special here," he told me during my interview, leaning forward with practiced sincerity. "I need people who understand that success comes from sacrifice." I believed him. So much that for the first 2 years, I accepted every assignment, volunteered for weekend work, and crafted presentations he would deliver without mentioning my contribution. "You'll get your time," he'd say, patting my shoulder as he walked away with my research notes. This is how careers are built. The truth revealed itself slowly. First came the client meeting where I noticed Nathaniel presenting my strategy word for word, including the personal anecdote I'd written as an icebreaker. Then the company newsletter highlighting his innovative approach that I'd spent 3 weeks developing. But the real awakening came during the Westridge project. Westridge Technologies was a potential client that could double our annual revenue. Their CFO, Imogen Halsey, was notoriously difficult to impress. For months, Nathaniel had tried to secure a meeting without success. "It's impossible," he complained during a staff meeting. "They don't return calls and their gatekeepers are impenetrable." That evening, I stayed late, researching Imogen. I discovered she volunteered at a literacy program near our office. The next week, I signed up as a volunteer too. We sorted books side by side for 3 hours before business came up naturally in conversation. "You're with Altitude?" she asked, surprised. "Your firm has been persistent." "We believe in what you're building," I said simply. "But I understand if we're not the right fit." She studied me. "Your director, Crawford. He's quite confident in your pitch emails." "Confidence has its place," I answered carefully, "but I prefer listening first." 2 days later, Imogen requested a meeting, specifically asking that I attend. When I told Nathaniel, his face brightened with triumph. "I knew persistence would pay off," he said, already mentally counting the commission. "I'll handle the presentation. You can take notes." The meeting went brilliantly because Imogen directed her questions to me. Whenever Nathaniel tried to dominate, she politely redirected. By the end, she requested that I be her direct contact. Nathaniel agreed enthusiastically in the room. In the elevator afterward, his demeanor changed. "What did you do?" he demanded. "How do you know her?" I explained about the volunteer work. That's practically stalking," he sputtered. "It's unprofessional." "It's relationship building," I corrected, and it worked. The next day, Nathaniel informed me that, after consideration, he would remain Westridge's primary contact. "It makes more sense hierarchically," he explained. "You understand." I did understand. I understood perfectly. That night, I made a decision. I created a separate contact list, my personal email, my cell phone number, and began quietly providing it to key clients. For after-hours emergencies, I explained, sometimes approvals can't wait for morning. They were grateful, and they used it, not just for emergencies, but for questions, concerns, weekend thoughts, and middle-of-the-night worries. Over the next 3 years, I built a shadow network of relationships. When clients called the office, they worked with Nathaniel. When they needed actual solutions, they texted me. I answered emails at midnight, delivered last-minute changes before dawn, and remembered their children's names and school achievements. To Nathaniel and upper management, I was the adequate but unexceptional marketing coordinator who handled administrative tasks. To our clients, I was the indispensable problem solver who made their lives easier. The company systems showed Nathaniel as the account manager for our top 20 clients. Reality told a different story. 17 of those clients had my personal phone number on speed dial. 15 had never spoken to Nathaniel without me present in over a year. 12 had explicitly told me they worked with Altitude because of my service. All while Nathaniel received performance bonuses for exceptional client retention. I wasn't the only victim of his credit stealing. My colleague Dario created an award-winning campaign that Nathaniel presented as his brainchild at an industry conference. Priya developed a digital analytics system that Nathaniel showcased to the board as evidence of his technical innovation. Vihan's crisis management strategy for a difficult client became another chapter in Appling's system, Nathaniel's self-mythology. We commiserated after hours, these talented people whose work fueled someone else's reputation. But we needed our jobs, needed the references, needed the health insurance and steady paychecks. So we endured. Until that quarterly meeting. The humiliation wasn't random. Earlier that week, we had lost a potential client, the only presentation I hadn't helped Nathaniel prepare because I was managing a crisis for our largest account. The potential client had asked technical questions Nathaniel couldn't answer. Rather than admit his knowledge gap, he'd made promises our team couldn't fulfill. When I learned about these promises, I sent a private email suggesting we clarify our capabilities before contracts were signed. The client ultimately went with a competitor, citing concerns about transparency. Nathaniel needed a scapegoat. I became the failure in marketing. As my colleagues' laughter faded and Nathaniel continued his presentation, something crystallized within me. Not rage, something colder and more focused. I reached into my bag and removed a slim blue folder I'd prepared months earlier, never quite believing I would use it. Inside was evidence of what I actually contributed. Emails from clients praising my work, texts requesting my help specifically, and most damning written statements from our top accounts confirming they worked with Altitude because of their relationship with me. I rose slowly, interrupting Nathaniel mid-sentence. The room quieted as I walked to the front, placed the folder precisely in the center of the conference table and said, "For the board's review." Then I walked out. My hands trembled as I gathered my personal items. A plant, a framed degree, a sweater I kept for cold days. I didn't take my laptop or phone. Those belonged to the company. I had backups of important information elsewhere. I made it to the parking lot before I heard hurried footsteps behind me. "Aloan, wait!" I turned to see Vivienne Okafor, our CEO, clutching the blue folder and trying to catch her breath. At 57, with 2 decades of executive experience, she rarely showed anything but composed control. Now she looked genuinely alarmed. "You can't just leave," she said. "I believe I can," I replied. "My employment contract requires 2 weeks' notice, which I'm happy to provide in writing." "That's not," she took a deep breath. "You've just shown me that you personally control relationships with clients representing over 80% of our annual revenue. We need to discuss this." I looked at her directly. "Now you want to talk? After I've been publicly humiliated? After 5 years of watching my work become someone else's accomplishment?" "I didn't know," she said quietly. "You didn't want to know," I corrected. "Nathaniel delivers results. No one questioned how." She didn't deny it. "Come back inside." Not to the meeting, to my office. please. I considered walking away. Part of me wanted the satisfaction of leaving them to discover just how dependent they'd become on someone they'd undervalued for years. But the wiser part knew that scorched earth rarely grows new opportunities. 30 minutes, I agreed. Vivienne's office occupied the corner of our floor, with windows overlooking the city. I'd been there exactly twice, once during my initial interview and once when I received a standard 3-year service award. She closed the door and took a seat, not behind her desk, but in one of the visitor chairs beside me. "I've spent the last 10 minutes reading client emails about you," she said, tapping the folder. "Imogen Halsey from Westridge says she would follow you to any agency. The Corrington Group apparently consults you before making marketing decisions. Not us. You specifically. 8 different clients refer to you as their actual account manager." She looked up. "How did this happen without anyone noticing?" "People see what they expect to see," I said. "You expected Nathaniel to be successful because he fits your image of success. You expected me to be forgettable because I don't demand attention." "That's a significant blind spot on my part," she admitted. "It's a common one." Vivienne studied me with new interest. "What do you want, Elowen? A promotion? Nathaniel's job? Name it." I hadn't prepared for this question. I'd imagined walking away, perhaps with a settlement agreement to keep client information confidential. I hadn't considered that I might be given a choice. "I want recognition," I said finally. "Not just for me. For everyone whose work builds this company while others take credit. I want a client service model that values relationships over personalities. I want transparency in who actually handles accounts and compensation that reflects that reality." "That's ambitious," she noted. "So is controlling 85% of your client relationships while being called a failure in marketing," I countered. She acknowledged this with a slight nod. "What specifically would this restructuring look like?" For the next 20 minutes, I outlined a vision I hadn't realized I'd been developing for years. Account teams with clearly defined roles and visible contributions. Compensation tied directly to client feedback and retention. Internal systems that tracked actual client interactions rather than title-based assumptions. "And Nathaniel?" she asked when I finished. "That depends on whether he's willing to work within a system based on accountability rather than appearance," I said. Vivienne was silent for a long moment. "The board meeting is next week. I'd like you to formally present this restructuring proposal." She held up a hand as I started to object. "Not as a negotiation for your continued employment. As the new director of client relationships, a position reporting directly to me." "And my current position?" "We'll need to fill that, unless you have someone in mind who could handle marketing coordination under your leadership." The image of Nathaniel relegated to administrative support flashed through my mind. It had a certain poetic justice. "I'll think about it," I said. 1 week, Vivienne agreed. "No announcements until after the board meeting. In the meantime," she hesitated. "How do we handle the situation downstairs?" I considered this. "Tell them I've taken the rest of the day for personal reasons. Nothing more until decisions are finalized." She stood, extending her hand. "Thank you for not simply walking away, Elowen. It would have been justified but devastating for the company." I shook her hand. "I'm not doing it for the company. I'm doing it for the people who deserve better." Walking out of the building for the second time that day felt different. The weight of decision now rested with me, not with those who had underestimated me for years. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Click the bell icon for notifications because the revenge that's coming next is something you won't want to miss. Every like helps others find this story too, especially those who might need to hear that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should worry about most. The 7 days that followed were strangely quiet. I returned to work the next morning to find curious glances but no direct questions. Nathaniel avoided me entirely. Whether from embarrassment or strategy, I couldn't tell. I performed my usual tasks while mentally preparing for the board presentation that would either transform the company or end my time there. On the 3rd day, Dario caught me alone in the break room. "What happened after you walked out?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "Everyone's talking, but nobody knows anything." "Nothing's decided yet," I answered truthfully. He studied me for a moment. "Whatever you're planning, I'm with you. We all are. Me, Priya, Vihan, everyone who's watched their work becomes someone else's victory lap. His support touched me more than I expected. Thank you. That means more than you know. At home each night, I refined my presentation, anticipating every possible objection. I created financial projections showing how my proposed restructuring would increase retention rates and expand existing accounts. I documented case studies of similar models in other industries. I prepared responses to the inevitable concerns about disrupting established client relationships. But my most important preparation had nothing to do with slideshows or spreadsheets. It involved personal calls to our top 15 clients, explaining that changes might be coming and gauging their reactions. Without exception, they expressed the same sentiment. They wanted to continue working with me, regardless of my title or the company structure. The night before the board meeting, Vivienne called me. "Are you ready?" she asked without preamble. "Yes," I said simply. "Nathaniel requested to make a counter-presentation," she informed me. I approved it. My stomach tightened. "I see. This isn't a competition, Elowen. The board needs all perspectives to make an informed decision." "Of course," I agreed, though we both knew that's exactly what it was, a competition for the future direction of the company. "One more thing," she added. "I haven't shared the client statements with the board yet. I wanted you to present that evidence yourself." I thanked her and hung up, wondering if her decision was fairness or strategy. Either way, tomorrow would change everything. The boardroom of Altitude Marketing Solutions occupied the top floor, with windows overlooking the city skyline. 10 people sat around a gleaming table, 8 board members, plus Vivienne and the company legal counsel. Nathaniel was already there when I arrived, his expression unreadable. Vivienne made brief introductions, then turned to me. "Ms. Pierce has proposed a restructuring of our client service model. Given her unique perspective on our client relationships, the board has agreed to hear her proposal." I connected my laptop to the presentation system, took a deep breath, and began. For the past 5 years, I've observed a fundamental disconnect between how we present ourselves to clients and how we actually serve them. I started. This disconnect creates vulnerability in our business model and undervalues our most important asset, the relationships that drive client retention. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined my vision. I described how account managers actually functioned versus how they were recognized. I presented data showing correlation between client satisfaction and their access to consistent support personnel regardless of those personnel's titles. I demonstrated how our current system created bottlenecks, miscommunication, and unnecessary hierarchy. Then came the moment of truth. To illustrate the reality of our current client relationships, I've provided each of you with a folder containing communications between myself and our top 20 clients over the past year. The board members opened their folders, expressions shifting from polite interest to focused concern as they reviewed emails, text messages, and written statements from the companies that formed the backbone of our revenue. "As you can see," I continued, "these clients believe they're working with me as their primary contact, despite our internal systems listing others in that role. This isn't about individual achievement. It's about acknowledging the actual relationships that drive our business and restructuring to strengthen rather than obscure them." When I finished, the silence felt electric. Board Chairman Elias Montgomery was the first to speak. "This is enlightening," he said carefully, "and concerning. Mr. Crawford, your response?" Nathaniel stood smoothly, adjusting his tie. His presentation showed remarkable adaptation. He'd clearly prepared for a different conversation, but had adjusted his approach after hearing mine. "Ms. Pierce raises valid points about our client service model," he began, surprising me with his apparent agreement. However, her interpretation overlooks key factors. He clicked to his first slide, a chart showing client acquisition rates. "While relationship management is important, acquisition drives growth. Our current structure allows specialized roles, visionaries who bring clients in, and support staff who maintain day-to-day communication." The distinction wasn't subtle. In his framework, he was the visionary, and I was merely support staff. "Furthermore," he continued, "restructuring creates unnecessary risk. Clients value stability. They appreciate knowing a director oversees their account, even if they sometimes communicate with coordinators for routine matters. His presentation continued in this vein, acknowledging my points while reframing them to preserve the hierarchy that benefited him. It was skillfully done, and I could see several board members nodding along. When he finished, Chairman Montgomery thanked us both and asked us to wait outside while the board deliberated. In the hallway, Nathaniel and I stood awkwardly distanced from each other. "Nothing personal," he said after a minute of silence. "This is business." I looked at him directly. "Everything about business is personal, Nathaniel. That's what you never understood." Before he could respond, we were called back in. The board members sat with more serious expressions than before. Chairman Montgomery addressed us. "We've reviewed both presentations and the supporting evidence. This situation reveals significant oversight in how we've managed client relationships." He turned to me. "Ms. Pierce, your documentation of client communications is compelling. It suggests a level of relationship dependency that poses both opportunity and risk for the company." He shifted toward Nathaniel. "Mr. Crawford, your points about stability and specialized roles have merit, but cannot outweigh the reality of who our clients actually trust with their business." Vivienne took over. "The board has approved a modified version of Ms. Pierce's restructuring proposal, effective immediately. We'll create a new client relationship department under Elowen's direction, with transparent attribution of account responsibilities and compensation adjusted accordingly." I maintained my professional composure, but inside, validation surged through me. "Additionally," she continued, "we're implementing a full audit of all client accounts to accurately document who manages each relationship. This will require a temporary reassignment of some personnel until the audit is complete." She turned to Nathaniel. "Mr. Crawford, your experience in presentation and acquisition remains valuable. You'll transition to new business development, focusing exclusively on bringing in new clients. Once acquired, these accounts will transition to the client relationship department for ongoing management." The demotion was tactfully presented but unmistakable. Nathaniel would no longer control existing accounts or take credit for others' relationship management. His face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched near his jaw. "The board expects full cooperation during this transition," Chairman Montgomery added, his tone making clear this wasn't a request. "We'll reconvene in 90 days to assess progress." Outside the boardroom, Vivienne pulled me aside. "We need to announce this today. The whole company should hear it directly from leadership rather than through gossip." 2 hours later, the entire staff gathered in our largest conference room. Curiosity and tension filled the air company-wide meetings. Without prior notice usually meant layoffs or major announcements. Vivienne explained the restructuring with practiced executive clarity, presenting it as strategic evolution rather than correction of a flawed system. When she introduced me as the new director of client relationships, surprised murmurs spread through the room. "Additionally," she continued, "we're establishing a team structure that properly recognizes contributions to client retention. Dario Espinoza will lead creative services. Priya Nayak will head analytics and reporting. Vihan Mehta will direct crisis management." My colleagues' faces transformed with stunned recognition. All the people whose work had been claimed by others were suddenly being elevated. Across the room, Nathaniel sat with a rigid smile, his new title noticeably absent from the announcement. Vivienne concluded with practiced optimism about our future, then opened the floor for questions. The first came from Lena in accounting. "What happens to current account assignments?" she asked. "Excellent question," Vivienne replied. "Over the next 2 weeks, Ms. Pierce will conduct a comprehensive review of all client relationships to determine who actually maintains each account. Staff will be reassigned based on documented client interaction, not previous title." Another hand rose Jorge from the design team. "Will compensation models change to reflect the new structure?" "Yes," I answered, stepping forward. "Those who maintain client relationships will receive appropriate compensation for that responsibility, regardless of seniority or previous arrangements." The implications rippled through the room. Those who had done the work would finally be recognized and rewarded for it. Those who had claimed credit would lose both status and financial benefit. As the meeting dispersed, I felt the weight of 30 different reactions. Some colleagues approached with congratulations. Others observed cautiously from a distance, calculating how these changes might affect them. Nathaniel disappeared immediately. The transformation that followed wasn't easy. Restructuring never is, especially when it challenges established power dynamics. The first week brought resistance from those who benefited from the old system. 2 senior managers threatened to quit rather than have their actual client contributions evaluated. One followed through. The other reconsidered when a major client specifically requested to continue working with his junior associate instead of him. Dario, Priya, and Vihan embraced their new leadership roles with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. During our first department heads meeting, Priya voiced what they were all feeling. "This opportunity means everything," she said. "But I'm terrified of failing. What if I can't handle the responsibility?" "You've already been handling it," I reminded her. "The only difference is now you'll get credit for it." Nathaniel's adjustment proved most difficult. New business development isolated him from existing clients and required skills he'd claimed to have but had actually delegated. Without a team to generate ideas or prepare materials, his performance quickly revealed the gaps between his reputation and his capabilities. 3 weeks after the restructuring, he appeared at my office door. "Do you have a minute?" he asked, his confident demeanor noticeably diminished. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same desk that had been his before our offices were reassigned. "This isn't working," he said without preamble. "I need support staff for new business development." "Everyone needs support," I acknowledged. "That's why we're building collaborative teams rather than hierarchies. I can't create presentations like your people do. I can't generate the analytics Priya provides. Without that material, I can't land new accounts." I studied him, recognizing the unfamiliar territory he found himself in, actually needing to acknowledge others' value. "You're right," I said. "No one person can do everything this business requires. That's the entire point of our restructuring." "So, you'll assign someone to prepare my materials?" "No, but I'll have our teams collaborate with you, with proper credit for their contributions. You bring valuable skills in presentation and relationship initiation. We need those skills, just as you need the support of people with different talents." He seemed about to argue, then deflated slightly. "Fine. When can we start?" "We already have. Check your email. You're included in tomorrow's creative brief for the laden pitch. Your role is clearly defined, as is everyone else's." After he left, I sat quietly, absorbing the reality of our reversed positions. There was satisfaction in it, certainly, but something else too. The recognition that true success would come not from his diminishment, but from creating a system where everyone's contributions were valued appropriately. The client audit confirmed what I already knew. Most of our major accounts maintained relationships with staff members who received little recognition for their role. We restructured accordingly, with compensation adjustments that caused our CFO visible distress, until I demonstrated how improved retention rates would offset the increased costs. 2 months into the new structure, results began speaking for themselves. Client satisfaction scores increased by 22%. Staff turnover dropped dramatically. 3 clients who had been considering other agencies recommitted to extended contracts. Most surprisingly, after his initial struggle, Nathaniel began finding his proper place. Without the pressure to appear omniscient, he focused on the relationship initiation he actually excelled at. His first successful acquisition under the new system was noteworthy not for its size but for his acknowledgement of the team that helped secure it. "I couldn't have done this without Dario's creative direction and Priya's market analysis," he said during the announcement, words I never expected to hear from him. At the 90-day board review, Vivienne presented numbers that exceeded even my optimistic projections. Chairman Montgomery nodded with satisfaction. "It appears transparency suits us," he remarked. "The question now is sustainability. Can this model continue to function as we grow?" "That's our next challenge." I agreed. We're documenting every process and relationship dynamic to create scalable systems. The core principle remains the same, recognizing the actual work rather than the perception of work. "And what about you, Miss Pierce?" another board member asked. "Are you satisfied with the outcome of your initiative?" The question gave me pause. Was I satisfied? The restructuring had given me the recognition and authority I'd earned. It had elevated deserving colleagues and created a more equitable system. But satisfaction implied an endpoint, and I was just beginning. I'm encouraged, I answered carefully. But true success isn't measured in 90 days. It's measured in the culture we create going forward. Later that evening, as I was preparing to leave, Vivienne stopped by my office. The board is impressed, she said, particularly with how you've handled Nathaniel. They expected you to push him out. That was never my goal, I replied. Removing him wouldn't solve the underlying problem. She leaned against the doorframe. No, but it might have felt satisfying. I smiled slightly. More satisfying is watching him learn to succeed within a fair system rather than at others' expense. That's unusually gracious. It's practical. Grudges take energy I'd rather invest elsewhere. She nodded thoughtfully. We're expanding next quarter, opening the West Coast office we've discussed for years. I'd like you to oversee the client transition. That's a significant responsibility. One you've earned through demonstrated competence, not office politics. She straightened. Consider it officially offered. After she left, I sat at my desk, the desk that had once symbolized everything I couldn't access, and reflected on how thoroughly circumstances had changed. The journey from invisible contributor to recognized leader hadn't followed any path I'd imagined. The transformation hadn't come through a dramatic confrontation or public humiliation of those who had undervalued me. It had come through simply revealing the truth and creating a system where truth mattered. 6 months after that fateful quarterly meeting, I stood at the podium during our annual company gathering, preparing to announce our record growth numbers. Scanning the room, I saw a transformed organization: Priya confidently briefing new analytics staff, Vihan mentoring junior crisis managers, Dario reviewing portfolio pieces with his expanded creative team, and Nathaniel, sitting with the business development group he now led effectively rather than ceremonially, actually listening to a junior member's suggestion. When Vivienne introduced me, the applause felt genuine rather than obligatory. I stepped to the microphone, took a breath, and began. 1 year ago, I sat in this room believing my contributions would never be recognized. Today, I stand here not because that belief was wrong, but because when recognition finally came, it revealed something important. Success isn't about individual achievement. It's about creating systems where everyone's contributions matter. I proceeded with the formal presentation, sharing growth figures and client retention statistics that demonstrated the effectiveness of our restructured approach. But the most significant metric wasn't on any slide. Our employee satisfaction has increased 58% since implementing transparent attribution and compensation. People stay when they're valued for their actual contributions rather than their ability to claim credit. Afterward, as conversations flowed around me, Nathaniel approached hesitantly. That was a good presentation, he said, the compliment clearly difficult for him. Thank you. He shifted uncomfortably. I've been meaning to say, the new structure works better than I expected. Coming from him, this was monumental admission. It works because everyone contributes what they're actually good at, I said, including you. He nodded, a flash of his old confidence returning. The Meridell account. We couldn't have landed it without the team approach. I make the introduction. Dario creates the visuals. Priya provides the analytics. And you structure the relationship management. Exactly. He started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, I was wrong about you being a failure in marketing. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Nathaniel, it was the closest I'd ever get. I nodded my acknowledgement, watching as he rejoined his team. Later that evening, I stood by the windows overlooking the city lights, contemplating the journey that had brought me here. A voice interrupted my thoughts. Quite a transformation, Vivienne said, joining me at the window. Both for the company and for you. Change was necessary, I replied. Yes, but change doesn't always happen so successfully. She turned to face me. The board has authorized a new executive position, Chief Client Officer. They'd like to offer it to you. I raised an eyebrow. Another promotion? Not just a promotion. A seat on the board itself. Policy, making authority beyond just implementation. The offer represented everything I'd once thought: unattainable recognition at the highest level, influence over company direction, equality with those who had once dismissed me. "I'll need to review the details," I said, maintaining professional composure despite the surge of validation I felt. "Of course." She handed me a folder. "Review it this weekend. We'll talk Monday." As she walked away, I opened the folder and saw the compensation figure triple my current salary, plus equity options and performance bonuses. Material recognition to match the professional acknowledgement. My phone buzzed with a text from Dario. "Heard the news from Vivienne. Celebration dinner tomorrow?" I smiled and replied affirmatively, then returned to watching the city lights. The greatest revenge against those who underestimate you isn't to destroy them. It's to create something so undeniably successful that they're forced to recognize their misjudgment, and then to include them in that success on fair terms. The company flourished not because I won and Nathaniel lost, but because we created a system where winning wasn't zero-sum, where credit went where it belonged, where value was measured by contribution rather than position. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or had your work claimed by someone else, I hope this story resonates with you. The path to recognition isn't always confrontation. Sometimes it's about quietly documenting your value until the evidence becomes undeniable. It's about building authentic relationships that matter more than organizational charts. Have you experienced something similar in your workplace? Or found a way to claim recognition for your contributions? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about workplace dynamics and professional growth, because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply recognize ourselves, even when others don't. The table for 8 sat empty except for me. The gold and silver, congratulations. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling fan, casting strange shadows over the white tablecloth. I checked my watch. 2 hours and 17 minutes since I'd arrived. My phone remained silent except for the occasional ping from the restaurant's Wi-Fi connecting and disconnecting. "Would you like to order now, or are you still waiting?" the server asked for the 4th time, sympathy edging into impatience. "Just 5 more minutes," I said, the words feeling hollow even to my own ears. The reservation had been made by Quinn, my boss, who had enthusiastically suggested this upscale restaurant to celebrate my promotion to senior research developer. "We'll get everyone there," he'd promised. "The whole team wants to celebrate you, Bryn." I sipped water that had long since lost its chill and pretended to study the menu I'd memorized an hour ago. My finger traced circles on the condensation from my glass, creating tiny pools on the tablecloth. The waitstaff now actively avoided eye contact, their pitying glances more painful than outright rudeness would have been. My phone vibrated against the table. Not a text from Quinn explaining the delay. Not an apology from Talia, who had been my work confidant for 5 years, who had helped me rehearse my acceptance speech for this very promotion. Instead, a notification from a social media app I rarely used. Something twisted inside me as my finger hovered over the screen. I shouldn't look. I knew I shouldn't. I tapped it anyway. The image loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, like the universe wanted to give me one last chance to turn away. There they were, my entire department crowded around a massive cake at the rooftop bar across town. The Skyline, where we sometimes went for after-work drinks. Where I'd once held Talia's hair back when she got sick after too many cocktails. Where Quinn had first mentioned I might be considered for promotion. "Happy retirement," read the icing on the cake. The caption tagged Camden, my rival who'd been with the company for just 7 years to my 5. Camden, who consistently took shortcuts while I worked weekends. Camden, who was apparently important enough for everyone to abandon my celebration. In the photo, Talia had her arm around Camden, her smile wider than any she'd ever given me. Quinn stood nearby, raising a toast. Nico, Faye, Wes, Jasper, all my colleagues, clustered around, glasses high, faces flushed with genuine joy. Not one of them had even bothered to text me. I zoomed in on the timestamp. The photo had been posted 40 minutes ago, when they were already over an hour late to my dinner. This wasn't a case of stopping by both events. They had chosen, collectively and deliberately, to skip mine entirely. The realization hit me with physical force. I wasn't just forgotten, I was excluded, intentionally left behind while they celebrated the person who had made my professional life a quiet nightmare for years. My finger hovered over the screen when another notification appeared. HR department. We need to talk. Now. Before I could process this, another message flashed. 93 missed calls. My hands began to tremble. Was I being fired? On my promotion day? Had the announcement been a mistake? Had they gathered to celebrate Camden's retirement and my termination on the same night? I stood up so quickly, my chair scraped loudly against the floor. Throwing cash on the table to cover the drinks I'd nursed for hours, I rushed outside, ignoring the startled looks from the restaurant staff. Rain had started to fall, gentle but persistent. I stood under the restaurant's awning, staring at my phone in disbelief. 93 missed calls, all from the company's HR department. How had I not noticed them? Then I remembered turning off my ringer during a meeting that morning and never turning it back on. With shaking fingers, I called the number back. Human Resources, this is Veda speaking. The voice on the other end sounded breathless, panicked. This is Bryn Azarian. I have several missed calls from Bryn. Thank goodness. Where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for hours. I was at my promotion dinner, I said, bitterness seeping into my voice. Alone. There was a brief pause. Listen, we have a situation. The materials for tomorrow's investor meeting. They're showing catastrophic failures in test buildings using the rapid development formula. My heart started pounding. The rapid development formula? That's not my work. That's Camden's approach. Well, it's what's in all the presentation materials. The CEO is furious. The entire executive team is at headquarters now. The company will collapse if tomorrow's funding round fails. But my formula works. I have all the test results. Can you come in, now? You're literally the only person who might save us. I glanced back through the restaurant window at my empty celebration table, the balloons now drooping pathetically in the corner. I'll be there in 20 minutes. If you're shocked at how Bryn's colleagues treated her, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories of betrayal and sweet revenge. Comment below what you think Bryn should do next. Now, let's continue with her story. My name is Bryn Azarian, and until that night, I believed that hard work and integrity would eventually be recognized. I was 32 years old, with a double doctorate in chemistry and materials science that I'd earned while working part-time to support myself after my parents died in a car accident when I was 19. I had no siblings, few close friends outside of work, and had poured everything into my career. 5 years earlier, I'd joined the research team developing a revolutionary waste-to-building materials process. The concept was brilliant: transform plastic waste into construction materials stronger and more durable than concrete, at a fraction of the environmental cost. If successful, it could revolutionize both waste management and construction industries worldwide. I was quiet but thorough, spending long hours in the lab testing various molecular combinations. My colleagues respected my work ethic, if not my reserved personality. I didn't join happy hours often, preferring to stay late analyzing results, but I wasn't completely antisocial. I formed a close friendship with Talia, who joined the team a month after me. She was everything I wasn't: outgoing, quick-witted, socially adept. But she appreciated my dedication and often helped translate my technical findings into presentations that management could understand. Then Camden arrived. From day one, Camden commanded attention. Tall, with an easy smile and charismatic presence, Camden had a way of making everyone feel special with just a few words. Within weeks, Camden had charmed the entire management team with grandiose promises and flashy presentations. While I meticulously tested formulations in the lab, recording every failure and incrementally improving our process, Camden spent time cultivating relationships with upper management. When I raised concerns about Camden's rushed processes, skipping crucial testing phases, I was labeled overcautious and afraid of innovation. Science takes time, I argued in one heated meeting. So does bankruptcy, Camden replied, earning chuckles from around the table. We need to move faster or we'll miss our market window. Quinn, our department head, began excluding me from key discussions. I noticed meeting invites arriving after sessions had already begun. Reports I submitted would be misplaced. My budget requests were delayed or denied. My colleagues slowly drifted away too, gravitating toward Camden's orbit of optimism and promises. Only Talia remained loyal, or so I thought. They just don't understand how thoroughness protects the company, she would assure me over lunch. Keep doing what you're doing, Bryn. Someone will notice eventually. And someone did notice. 3 weeks ago, independent testing confirmed what I had known for months. My formula worked. It created materials that were stable, strong, and scalable. Camden's rapid development approach, which had been promoted as the company's primary direction for the past year, showed alarming instabilities in prolonged weather testing. The announcement of my promotion to senior research developer shocked everyone, especially me. The company needed someone to lead the commercialization phase, and somehow, despite years of being sidelined, I'd risen to the top. Camden announced retirement the very next day, scheduling a party for the same evening as my promotion dinner. I tried not to take it personally. Maybe after being the golden child for so long, the reality of being passed over was too much to bear. Talia had promised to be at my dinner early. "I'll help set everything up," she'd said. "This is your moment, Bryn." Now, as I drove through the rain toward the office, her betrayal stung more than all the others combined. The parking garage was unusually full for 8 o'clock at night. I recognized the CEO's luxury vehicle and several executive cars. This was serious. When I entered the conference room, the tension was palpable. Screens displayed images of crumbling test structures, the rapid development formula disintegrating under basic weather conditions. Quinn looked up, surprise flashing across his face. "Bryn, what are you doing here? Weren't you having some dinner?" HR called me. 93 times, actually. I kept my voice neutral, though anger simmered beneath the surface. The CEO waved me over. "Bryn, thank goodness. We've got a disaster on our hands. These are going to investors tomorrow?" I asked, gesturing toward the screens. The conference room door opened, and Camden walked in, followed by Talia and several others, all still wearing party clothes. The scent of alcohol hung around them. "My retirement party was interrupted for this?" Camden asked, voice sharp with irritation. "The formula just needs minor adjustments." I opened my laptop, avoiding looking at Talia. "That formula will never work. The molecular bonding is fundamentally unstable under variable weather conditions. So, we're doomed," the CEO said, rubbing his temples. "Not exactly." I pulled up my test results. "My formula works. Has worked for months. I've been trying to tell everyone." The room fell silent as I explained the technical details. I noticed Talia shift uncomfortably when I mentioned the testing I'd completed 3 months ago. Testing she knew about but had apparently never mentioned to others. "Where are these results in our presentation materials?" the CEO demanded. Camden stepped forward. "I've never seen these tests. She must have run them independently, outside protocol." "That's not true," I said quietly. "I submitted all findings through proper channels. Every test, every result." Quinn cleared his throat. "I don't recall seeing these specific results." Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. He wasn't meeting my eyes. Neither was Talia. "Check the shared drive," I suggested. "Project folder, subfolder, long-term stability testing, date range March through May." The CEO nodded to the IT director, who pulled up the drive on the main screen. The folder was empty. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I uploaded everything. Files get lost," Camden said with a shrug, "especially when they're not properly communicated to the team." I felt a cold understanding sweep through me. This wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately removed my findings, but I had prepared for this possibility. Years of being overlooked had taught me to keep backups. "I have copies," I said, plugging my external drive into the computer. "And I can prove these tests were completed under protocol." As the files loaded, I noticed Talia slip something into a desk drawer at the back of the room. Her movement was casual but purposeful. For the next 2 hours, I walked the executive team through my formula and testing protocol. By the end, there was consensus. We would revise tomorrow's presentation to feature my stable formula instead of Camden's failing one. "You've saved us, Bryn," the CEO said, patting my shoulder as the meeting broke up. I don't understand how we almost missed this. I smiled tightly. Neither do I. As people filed out, I hung back, pretending to gather my materials. When the room emptied, I walked to the drawer I'd seen Talia access. Inside was a folder labeled Camden's Final Project, Investor Presentation. I opened it with trembling hands. There were my original reports, with my name removed and Camden's inserted instead. I stared at the altered documents, a strange calm settling over me. 5 years of dedication, of being overlooked and underestimated, crystallized into this moment of absolute clarity. It wasn't just Camden. It was Talia. It was Quinn. It was an entire system that rewarded those who took shortcuts over those who did the work. I made digital copies of the altered documents and carefully returned the originals exactly as I'd found them. Then I walked out of the building into the rain, which had intensified to match my mood. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, formulating a plan that would change everything. The next morning, I arrived at work early, before most of the team. The investor meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and everyone would be scrambling to incorporate my formula into the presentation. I dressed meticulously, a sleek outfit I'd bought for my promotion dinner, tags still attached. Quinn spotted me in the hallway and approached with a nervous smile. "Bryn, you're a lifesaver." The team worked all night revising the materials. "Happy to help," I said, my voice pleasantly neutral. "About last night," he began, then paused. "Your dinner. We should have—" "It's fine," I interrupted. "The company comes first, right? That's what you've always said." He looked relieved. "Exactly. I'm glad you understand." "I understand perfectly," I replied, maintaining eye contact until he looked away first. The investor meeting went flawlessly. My formula impressed the group of stern-faced venture capitalists who had flown in from across the country. The CEO beamed as they agreed to provide the full funding amount, $180 million, to scale production. Camden sat at the far end of the table, face carefully composed but fingers drumming restlessly against a leather portfolio. Talia kept shooting glances my way, but I focused on answering technical questions with precision and confidence. After the investors left, the CEO clapped his hands together. "Champagne for everyone! We did it!" Glasses were passed around, and Quinn raised his in a toast. To teamwork and innovation. Everyone drank except me. When Quinn noticed, he raised an eyebrow. "Not celebrating, Bryn? I'm just processing," I said quietly. "It's been an eventful 24 hours. Camden approached, champagne glass in hand. "Nice save with the formula. We should talk about how to integrate some of my rapid development techniques into your approach." "That would be difficult," I replied, "considering your approach fundamentally undermines the molecular stability that makes my formula work." Camden's smile tightened. "There's always room for collaboration." "Is there?" I asked. "Like how you collaborated with my research by removing my name and adding yours?" The color drained from Camden's face. Nearby, Talia suddenly became very interested in her champagne. "I don't know what you're talking about," Camden said, voice low. "I think you do. But we don't need to discuss it now. This is a celebration after all." I walked away, feeling Camden's eyes burning into my back. Over the next week, I appeared completely cooperative. I led technical briefings. I answered questions. I maintained a pleasant, professional demeanor that revealed nothing of my inner thoughts. Meanwhile, I was gathering information. Every email, every altered document, every meeting where decisions about my work had been made without me. The company atmosphere shifted subtly. My suddenly central role in the project created a power imbalance no one quite knew how to navigate. Camden postponed retirement, citing a desire to ensure smooth transition of knowledge. Quinn became overly solicitous, including me in every meeting, asking for my input on decisions that had nothing to do with my department. Talia tried repeatedly to speak with me privately. "Bryn, we need to talk," she said, cornering me in the lab one afternoon. "About what?" I asked, focusing on my computer screen. "About everything. The dinner, the documents. I want to explain." I finally looked at her. "What's there to explain? You made your choices." "It wasn't like that," she insisted. "Things got complicated." Camden had Quinn convinced that your approach was too cautious, that we'd lose our funding window. I tried to advocate for you, but what? You decided stealing my work was easier than standing up for what's right? Her eyes filled with tears. I was scared. Quinn made it clear that anyone siding with you would be sidelined. I have my mother's medical bills, Bryn. I couldn't risk my job. And now? I asked. Now that it's clear my approach was right all along? What are you scared of now, Talia? She didn't answer. That's what I thought, I said, turning back to my computer. 3 weeks after the investor meeting, I requested a private session with the board of directors. Quinn tried to dissuade me. The board is very busy, he said. Anything you need to discuss can go through normal channels. Not this, I replied. This requires direct board attention. Is this about Camden? Because we can address any concerns internally. It's not just about Camden, I cut him off. It's about systematic issues that nearly cost this company everything. He fell silent, a flicker of fear crossing his face. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. For the weekend preceding it, I didn't answer calls or texts from anyone at work. Instead, I hiked alone in the mountains, watching hawks circle overhead, feeling the sun on my face. For the first time in years, I felt completely clear about my path forward. Monday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine after a week of rain. I dressed carefully in understated professional attire and arrived early, setting up my presentation materials before the board members filed in. The CEO looked nervous. I had declined to share the specific nature of my presentation in advance. I hope this is important, Mrs. Arian, said the board chairwoman, an elegant woman in her 60s. We've adjusted several schedules to accommodate this request. I assure you it is, I replied, and I appreciate your time. As I began speaking, the room grew increasingly tense. I wasn't there to name names or assign blame, not yet. Instead, I methodically outlined how our company's culture had evolved to prioritize appearances over substance, charisma over competence, promises over results. 3 weeks ago, I said, this company nearly lost $180 million in funding because fundamental scientific processes were circumvented in favor of speed. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was the inevitable outcome of a system that rewards the wrong things. I presented a reorganization plan that would transform how projects were evaluated, a system with built-in accountability, multiple levels of scientific review, and protection for those who raised concerns about cutting corners. I'm not here to complain about credit, I told them. I'm here because our current structure rewards politics over results, and that nearly cost us everything. If we don't change now, we'll face this exact scenario again, perhaps with more devastating consequences. The board members exchanged glances. The chairwoman leaned forward. What you're suggesting would require significant restructuring, she said, including changes to key leadership positions. Yes, I agreed. It would. And you have concrete recommendations for those changes? I slid a folder across the table. I do. The CEO reached for it, but the chairwoman got there first. She opened it and read silently, her expression unreadable. Then she passed it to the person beside her. One by one, the board members reviewed my proposal. When everyone had read it, the chairwoman spoke. We'll need to discuss this privately, Ms. Azarian. Please wait outside. I nodded and left the room, sitting on a bench in the hallway. Through the closed door, I could hear raised voices. 2 hours passed. My phone buzzed with texts from Quinn, from Talia, from others on the team, all asking what was happening in the board meeting. I ignored them all. Finally, the door opened. The chairwoman gestured for me to come back in. Ms. Azarian, she said once I was seated, the board has deliberated on your proposal. While we have some modifications to suggest, we are in agreement with the fundamental restructuring you've outlined. The CEO looked pale. Several board members wouldn't meet my eyes. Furthermore, she continued, we believe such a significant reorganization requires new leadership. The board has voted to create a new division, Innovation Verification, with direct oversight of all research protocols and testing procedures. We would like to offer you the position of Division Director, effective immediately. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart raced. And my reporting structure? You would report directly to the board, she replied. and current research leadership would report to you. Quinn would report to me. The realization must have hit him at the same moment, as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. When would you like to announce these changes? I asked. A company-wide meeting has already been scheduled for tomorrow morning, the CEO said, his voice strained. We should present a united front. Of course, I agreed. A united front is important. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, the entire company gathered in the auditorium. Rumors had been circulating since my closed-door board meeting, and the atmosphere hummed with tension. Quinn fidgeted nervously in the front row. Camden, retirement once again postponed, looked confidently relaxed, clearly assuming whatever changes were coming wouldn't affect someone so essential to the company. Talia sat alone, chewing her lip anxiously. The CEO took the stage first, his smile not quite reaching his eyes as he announced the creation of the new Innovation Verification Division. When he introduced me as the division director, a murmur ran through the crowd. I stepped up to the microphone, surveying the faces before me, some confused, some worried, some calculating how this would affect their positions. Thank you all, I began. The changes we're implementing today aren't just about organizational structure. They're about values, about what kind of company we want to be. I outlined the new accountability-centered approach, explaining how every project would require verification before proceeding, how research findings would be subject to multiple independent reviews, how concerns about procedures could be raised without fear of retaliation. And one more thing, I added, noting how Camden's relaxed posture had gradually stiffened as I spoke. Everyone, from leadership to junior researchers, will participate in monthly rotation through the testing labs. Everyone needs to understand our core work from the ground up. The faces of my colleagues, the ones who'd skipped my dinner for Camden's retirement party, fell as they realized what this meant. Their comfortable routines were over. Camden, who had never actually worked in a lab despite leading research initiatives, looked particularly pale. As the meeting concluded and people filed out, Quinn approached with a strained smile. About missing your dinner, he began. I cut him off with a smile that contained not an ounce of warmth. No need for explanations, Quinn. I've learned who values my work, and more importantly, who doesn't. He swallowed hard and walked away. Talia waited until almost everyone had left before approaching me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Bryn, we'll have a departmental meeting tomorrow at 9, I interrupted. Please bring a complete accounting of all your current projects and research contributions. She stared at me. Is that all you have to say to me? I considered her for a long moment. For now, yes. Tomorrow is a new day, Talia, with new rules. As I walked out of the auditorium, I felt dozens of eyes on me, some fearful, some resentful, some calculating how to adapt to this new reality. I didn't look back. The time for looking back was over. That evening, I finally returned to the restaurant where I'd sat alone weeks earlier. I requested the same table, ordered a glass of wine, and savored a meal in solitude, not out of loneliness this time, but out of choice. The same server recognized me. Special occasion? She asked as she brought my dessert. Yes, I said, raising my glass in a toast to myself. I'm celebrating a promotion. The first month as Innovation Verification Division Director passed in a blur of meetings, policy implementations, and restructuring. I maintained a professional demeanor that revealed nothing of my inner thoughts, treating everyone with the same cool efficiency, even those who had betrayed me. My new office, centrally located with glass walls overlooking the main research floor, allowed me to observe everyone while remaining visible myself, a constant reminder of the new order. Quinn struggled to adjust to reporting to me. In our weekly one-on-one meetings, he alternated between attempting to establish our old dynamic, where he guided and I followed, and overcompensating with excessive deference. I've always valued your thoroughness, Bryn, he said during one such meeting, leaning forward earnestly. Even when it didn't seem like it. Is that why my reports kept getting lost? I asked mildly, not looking up from my tablet where I reviewed his team's latest submissions. He cleared his throat. That was unfortunate. Communication breakdowns happen in any organization. They certainly do, I agreed. which is why our new verification protocols require triple confirmation of receipt and review. No more breakdowns. No. The lab rotation program proved particularly illuminating. Senior managers who hadn't set foot in a testing facility in years found themselves running basic experiments alongside junior researchers. Camden, especially, struggled with the hands-on work, repeatedly making elementary mistakes that even first-year students would avoid. "This is busy work," Camden complained during the second week of rotation. "My skills are better utilized in strategic planning." "Your strategic planning is precisely why we needed this program," I replied. "Everyone needs to understand the science they're rushing to market." Talia adapted better than most, though the shadow of her betrayal hung between us. She threw herself into the lab work, staying late and volunteering for additional testing responsibilities. During group discussions, she would glance my way after making a point. Seeking approval, I deliberately withheld. One evening, she cornered me as I was leaving. "I know you haven't forgiven me," she said, her voice low, "but I'm trying to make it right. By doing your job? That's the minimum expectation, Talia." She flinched. "What do you want from me, Bryn?" "I've apologized. I'm working harder than anyone. What else can I do?" I studied her for a moment. "Why did you do it? Really? And don't talk to me about your mother's medical bills again. You could have kept your job without actively helping to steal my work." She looked away. "Camden convinced me you would hold the company back, that your cautious approach would mean we'd all lose our jobs when funding dried up." She swallowed hard. "And I wanted to be on the winning side. Just once. And now? Now I know I chose wrong," she whispered, "in every possible way." I nodded and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the corridor. As the second month began, resistance to my changes grew more organized. Quinn, Camden, and several senior managers began meeting after hours. Though they tried to be discreet, in a company full of scientists, very little remains truly hidden. Nico, a junior researcher who had been at Camden's retirement party, approached me hesitantly one morning. "Director Azarian, can I speak with you privately?" In my office, he nervously explained that he'd been invited to join what Quinn was calling a strategic alignment group, essentially a coalition to limit my influence and eventually push me out. "They're saying your changes are too disruptive," Nico said, "that the company will lose its competitive edge if every innovation has to pass through such rigorous verification." "And what do you think, Nico?" He looked surprised at the question. I think they're wrong. The lab rotations have already caught 3 major issues that would have caused problems down the line, and the open verification system means my concerns actually get heard now." I smiled. "Thank you for telling me. What will you do?" he asked. "Address it directly," I replied. "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." The next day, I called an all-hands meeting. Without naming names, I addressed the concerns about the verification process, slowing innovation. "Speed without accuracy isn't innovation, it's gambling," I told the assembled staff. "And we almost lost everything on that gamble 3 months ago." I presented data showing that despite the additional verification steps, our actual development timeline had shortened. Without the constant backtracking to fix fundamental issues that had been overlooked in the rush, we were making more consistent progress. "Anyone who feels our new structure is too restrictive is welcome to meet with me directly," I concluded. "My door is always open. What I will not tolerate is underground resistance that undermines our collective work." I looked directly at Quinn as I said this. His face flushed red. That afternoon, he came to my office, closing the door behind him. "That was quite a performance," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Publicly threatening people who disagree with you. Is that what you heard?" "Interesting." I gestured for him to sit. "I heard an invitation for open dialogue about concerns." "You've changed, Bryn. The person I hired 5 years ago would never have played politics like this. The person you hired 5 years ago trusted that hard work and honesty would be recognized on their merits." I leaned forward. She was wrong. "Look," Quinn said, changing tactics, his voice softening. "I know things got messy with the promotion dinner and Camden's retirement coinciding. We should have handled it better. But this reorganization has gone too far. You're alienating our best people." "Am I? Or am I exposing who those best people actually are?" He stared at me, then stood abruptly. The board won't support these changes forever. Once the initial scare wears off, they'll start asking questions about our innovation pipeline. They're welcome to, I replied. The numbers speak for themselves. As he reached the door, I added, by the way, Quinn, I'll need your team's verification documentation for the modified polymer project by tomorrow. It seems to be missing several required sign-offs. His shoulders tensed, but he left without another word. That night, I received an unexpected call from the board chairwoman, Elaine. Bryn, are you aware of the resistance you're facing from some of the senior team? She asked without preamble. Yes, I replied. It's to be expected with any significant change. Quinn has approached several board members individually, expressing concerns about innovation slowdown. My heart beat faster, but I kept my voice steady. Has he provided data to support these concerns? No, she said. Just anecdotal observations. I see. I've compiled extensive metrics on our development timeline since implementing the new protocols. I'd be happy to present them at the next board meeting. That would be helpful, she said. Bryn, there's something else. Camden is claiming that the original formula, your formula, is showing stability issues in recent testing. My blood ran cold. This was a direct attack on my credibility. If the formula that had saved the company turned out to be flawed, my position would be untenable. That's impossible, I said, unless the testing parameters have been modified. That's what I thought you might say, Elaine replied, which is why I've arranged for an independent lab to verify the results. In the meantime, tread carefully. You've made powerful enemies. After we hung up, I sat in my darkened apartment, mind racing. This wasn't just resistance to change. This was a coordinated effort to discredit me and reverse everything I'd accomplished. They were trying to prove that I was just as willing to cut corners as they were. The next morning, I arrived at the office before anyone else. I needed to examine Camden's alleged testing data before others arrived. It didn't take long to find the reports. They were prominently displayed on the shared drive, accessible to the entire research team. As I suspected, the testing parameters had been altered. The temperature range was extended far beyond standard conditions, and the humidity cycling was accelerated to an unrealistic degree. Under these extreme conditions, even the most stable materials would show signs of degradation. I was downloading the data when I heard a sound behind me. Turning, I found Talia standing in the doorway. I knew you'd find it, she said quietly. Did you know about this? I asked, gesturing to the screen. She nodded. Camden asked me to help design the modified testing parameters last week. I refused, but you didn't warn me. I wanted to, she said, stepping into the room, but I needed proof first. She held out a flash drive. This contains the original testing instructions Camden gave to the lab technicians, along with recordings of conversations where he specifically directed them to push the materials to failure. I stared at her. Why are you giving me this? Because what they're doing is wrong, she said simply, and because I want to finally be on the right side. I took the flash drive. This doesn't make us friends again, Talia. I know. A sad smile flickered across her face, but maybe it makes us not enemies. With Talia's evidence and my own analysis, I prepared a comprehensive report for Elaine and the independent testing lab. The attempt to sabotage my formula had been clumsy, motivated by desperation rather than careful planning. The next 2 weeks were tense. Camden, Quinn, and their allies moved through the office with confident smiles, clearly believing their plan was working. I maintained my usual calm demeanor, continuing to implement verification protocols and run the lab rotations as if nothing was wrong. Then came the day of reckoning. Elaine called an emergency board meeting. All senior staff were required to attend, including Quinn and Camden. The independent lab's representative, a stern woman named Dr. Ashby, presented her findings first. The formula developed by Director Azarian shows no stability issues whatsoever under standard testing conditions, she stated flatly. The reported degradation only occurs under extreme parameters that no building material would reasonably encounter unless situated directly on a volcano during an eruption. Quinn shifted uncomfortably. Camden stared stonily ahead. Furthermore, Dr. Ashby continued, our investigation revealed that these extreme testing parameters were deliberately designed to induce failure, with specific instructions to lab technicians to report any degradation, no matter how minor, as systematic formula instability. Elaine thanked Dr. Ashby, then turned to me. Director Azarian, do you have anything to add? Just this, I said, distributing copies of a document to each board member. This is my proposal for the final phase of our restructuring. Given the deliberate attempt to sabotage not just my position but the company's flagship product, I believe more comprehensive changes are needed. The board members read silently. Quinn tried to peek at the document in front of his neighbor, who angled it away from him. These are serious recommendations, Elaine said finally. Termination of several senior staff, a complete overhaul of the leadership team, and a new ethics committee with direct reporting to the board. Yes, I agreed. The events of the past 3 months have demonstrated that our problems run deeper than I initially believed. Quinn stood up, face flushed. This is outrageous. You can't fire people for challenging your methods. Sit down, Quinn, Elaine said sharply. No one is being fired for challenging methods, but deliberately falsifying test results to undermine a colleague and potentially damage the company's reputation with investors? That's another matter entirely. Camden remained silent, eyes fixed on the table. The board voted unanimously to accept my recommendations. By the end of the day, Quinn, Camden, and 3 other senior managers had been escorted from the building by security, their access badges deactivated. As I watched them leave from my office window, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a quiet certainty that justice had finally been served. The following week, I called Talia into my office. She entered cautiously, clearly unsure of her standing after the purge. I have a question for you, I said, gesturing for her to sit. Why did you help them steal my work in the first place, but then help me expose their sabotage attempt? She looked down at her hands. The first time, I convinced myself it was for the greater good, that Camden's approach might actually be faster, better for everyone. She met my eyes. The second time, there was no greater good to hide behind, just people trying to protect their power by hurting someone else. I considered her words. There's an opening for Assistant Director of Verification. Someone who understands both the science and how easily it can be manipulated for personal gain would be valuable in that role. Hope flickered across her face. Are you offering me the position? I'm offering you a chance to earn it, I replied. It will take time to rebuild trust. Are you willing to put in that time? Yes, she said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. 6 months later, I stood at the podium at our first commercial production facility ribbon-cutting ceremony. Behind me, rows of machinery hummed, transforming waste plastic into building materials that would revolutionize construction worldwide. Reporters snapped photos as I explained how our verification-centered approach had actually accelerated development by eliminating costly mistakes and backtracking. Our stock had doubled since the restructuring. The board had approved an expanded research budget and employee profit-sharing program. The company culture had transformed from one of shortcuts and politics to one of thoroughness and collaboration. As I fielded questions from journalists, I spotted Nico guiding a group of new hires through the facility. Talia stood with the executive team, her assistant director badge gleaming under the lights. She caught my eye and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. That evening, I returned to the restaurant where I'd sat alone on what should have been my celebration night. This time, I'd reserved a table for one by choice. The same server recognized me and smiled. Another special occasion? She asked as she brought my wine. Yes, I replied, raising my glass in a solitary toast, to patience and consequences. My phone buzzed with a news alert. I checked it and smiled. Quinn had just been turned down for a position at his third company in 6 months. Camden's consulting business had filed for bankruptcy after failing to secure any clients. The consequences of their actions had followed them, just as night follows day. I put my phone away and savored my meal, no longer the woman who had been forgotten and betrayed, but the architect of my own justice. Not through dramatic confrontation or public humiliation, but through something far more powerful. Creating a system where integrity finally mattered more than charm, where substance outweighed style, where the work spoke for itself. My revenge wasn't in destroying those who had wronged me. It was in building something so much better in their absence that their own choices had rendered them irrelevant. If this story of professional revenge resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about justice served with patience and intelligence. Have you ever been overlooked or had your work stolen? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting ahead and creating a system where integrity actually matters. The best farewell gift would be if you never showed your face here again. I froze, coffee mug suspended halfway to my lips. The break room fell silent, every face turning toward us. My boss, Darren, didn't even look up from stirring his expensive Colombian blend, acting as if he'd just commented on the weather forecast, rather than publicly humiliating me on my last day. 5 years. 5 years I'd given to the Immigrant Assistance Center. Late nights, weekends, holidays, clients who became like family, and this was my send-off. Is there something funny about my suggestion, Mira? Darren asked, finally looking up, his pale blue eyes narrowing at the small, involuntary sound that had escaped my throat. I placed my mug down carefully, feeling every pair of eyes in the room. Parvati from accounting, Tomas from legal aid, even the new intern, whose name I hadn't learned yet, all witnessing my public execution. No, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Nothing funny at all. I walked to my desk, collected my few personal items, and placed my access badge on the reception counter. The security guard, Everett, who'd greeted me every morning for 5 years, couldn't meet my eyes as I walked past. Outside, the September sun felt too bright, too ordinary for a day that had just shattered my professional life. I crossed the street to the small park and sat, staring back at the gleaming glass building where Darren would continue destroying lives while building his empire. My phone buzzed with a message. All set for 2 p.m., Agent Kishi. 2 hours. In 2 hours, everything would change. If you're enjoying this story of workplace betrayal and justice, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, what happens next is something you won't want to miss. Drop a comment if you've ever experienced workplace injustice. Your story matters too. My name is Mira Acharya, 32 years old, first-generation American with Indian parents who sacrificed everything to give me opportunities they never had. Growing up, I watched my father work 3 jobs while my mother sewed late into the night, taking in alterations from neighbors. They pushed me to excel, to get the education they couldn't. When I graduated with my social work degree, the pride in their eyes meant everything. I wasn't supposed to end up unemployed and sitting on a park bench, watching federal agents prepare to raid my workplace. But then again, Darren Blackwood wasn't supposed to be exploiting desperate immigrants for personal gain. Let me rewind to the beginning. I was ecstatic when I landed the job at the Immigrant Assistance Center. The organization had a sterling reputation for helping newcomers navigate the labyrinthine immigration system, offering legal aid, language classes, job placement services, and community support, all funded by government grants and private donations. My parents had relied on a similar center when they arrived in America. This was my chance to pay it forward. Darren had been charming during my interview, passionate about the center's mission. We're not just helping individuals, he'd said, leaning forward, eyes intense. We're building the next generation of American success stories. I believed him completely. My first month was everything I'd hoped for. I connected clients with resources, helped families fill out complicated paperwork, translated when needed, and saw immediate positive impact. My supervisor, Leela, was supportive and kind, showing me the ropes with patience. The work was demanding but fulfilling. Then Leela was gone. Family emergency. Darren explained vaguely during a staff meeting. Indefinite leave of absence. I'll be directly overseeing Mira and the intake team until further notice. Something felt off about Leela's sudden departure. She hadn't mentioned any family issues during our lunch together the day before. But I pushed the concern aside, focusing instead on the opportunity to work directly with the center's director. The first red flag appeared 3 weeks after Leela left. A young mother named Adira came to the center with her 4-year-old son. Their appointment was with me, but Darren intercepted them in the lobby. I'll handle this one, Mira, he said smoothly. Mrs. Nasser's case requires executive attention. I watched through the glass wall of his office as he spoke to her, his expression grave. 20 minutes later, Adira emerged, clutching her son's hand, eyes downcast and red-rimmed. When I approached her, offering a tissue, she flinched away and hurried out. Is everything okay with Mrs. Nasser? I asked Darren later. Some cases are more complex than others, he replied without looking up from his computer. Best you focus on the straightforward ones for now. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about Adira's face haunted me. Not just sadness, but fear. I told myself I was being paranoid. Darren was respected in the community. The center had awards lining its walls. The next morning, I arrived early and checked the client database. Adira's file showed only basic intake information. No notes from her meeting with Darren. No follow-up appointment scheduled. No indication of what services had been provided or what had caused her distress. This wasn't standard procedure. Even the briefest client interactions required documentation for grant compliance. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a pattern. Certain clients were always directed to Darren for special handling. Their files remained sparse, and they often left looking worse than when they arrived. I began paying attention to the appointment schedule. Almost every evening, after regular staff departed, Darren would meet with one or two clients. These appointments never appeared in the official calendar. One night, I stayed late, ostensibly to organize the resource library. The center was quiet except for muffled voices from Darren's office. His door was closed, but the old building's ventilation system carried sound in unpredictable ways. 5,000 now, 3,000 when the paperwork clears. Darren's voice came through clearly. But sir, a man responded, his accent thick with fear. This is everything my family has saved for 2 years. The website says your services are free. Free basic services, Darren corrected smoothly. Your situation requires specialized attention. With your asylum status in question and your daughter's medical needs, you can't afford delays. Government processing takes years. I can expedite everything, but that requires leveraging certain relationships. Expensive relationships. My blood ran cold. The center received federal funding specifically to provide free assistance to asylum seekers. If you can't manage it, Darren continued, his voice hardening, I understand. Of course, without proper representation, deportation becomes much more likely, especially with the current administration's policies. The silence that followed felt endless. Then came the sound of counting money. I slipped out before they emerged, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in a place meant to protect vulnerable people. That night, I barely slept, weighing my options. Report Darren to the board? But what if they were complicit? Go to the media? Without evidence, it would be my word against his. Confront him directly? The thought made my stomach clench. The next morning, I watched Darren greet donors at a breakfast fundraiser, charming and passionate about serving our immigrant community with dignity and compassion. The disconnect between his public persona and what I'd overheard made me physically ill. I decided to gather information cautiously. If what I suspected was true, Darren wasn't just bending rules. He was committing federal crimes, exploiting the most vulnerable people in our community, and potentially endangering lives. For the next 2 weeks, I created reasons to stay late, organizing files, preparing for community workshops, decorating for cultural celebrations. Each time, I positioned myself where I could overhear Darren's private meetings. The pattern was consistent. Clients with complicated cases, threats veiled as concerns, and payments that never appeared in official records. I needed help, but I didn't know who to trust. Then I remembered Leela's abrupt departure. Could she have discovered what Darren was doing? I still had her personal email from a staff birthday celebration months ago. My message was casual. Miss seeing you around the office. How's the family emergency going? Coffee sometime? Her response came at 2 a.m. Not safe to discuss. Be careful. Watch your back. Delete this. My hands shook as I stared at her warning. Whatever Leela had discovered had frightened her enough to leave without notice and without explanation to her team. I deleted the email as instructed, but not before taking a screenshot. The next day, Darren called me into his office. "Mira," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You've been with us, what, almost a year now?" 10 months, I corrected. "Right." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "And you've been quite enthusiastic, staying late, taking on extra projects, asking a lot of questions about client procedures." The air in the room seemed to thin. Somehow, he knew I was investigating him. "I'm committed to our mission," I said carefully. "Admirable. But I'm concerned you're spreading yourself too thin." He tapped his pen against a stack of papers. "I've been reviewing our budget, and unfortunately, we need to make some cuts. Your position will be eliminated at the end of the month." The words hit like a physical blow. My position? But we just received the Rosenthal grant. The center's funding increased by 30%. Something flickered in Darren's eyes, surprised that I knew about the grant, perhaps. Budget allocations are complex. We're restructuring to better serve clients. Translation. I was getting too close to his operation. "I understand," I said, hands steady despite my racing heart. "When should I finish my cases?" "You have 4 weeks. I'll need comprehensive notes for whoever takes over." He was already looking back at his computer, dismissing me. 4 weeks. It wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. That evening, I walked to the small Vietnamese restaurant 6 blocks from the center, far enough that I wouldn't encounter coworkers. I chose a booth in the back and ordered pho, more for the excuse to stay than from hunger. I needed a plan. Confronting Darren directly was dangerous. Going to the board seemed futile. He'd been appointed by them and shared golf memberships with half of them. The local police? Without concrete evidence, they'd likely dismiss my claims as those of a disgruntled employee. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Federal investigation uncovers immigration fraud ring. The article detailed how officials had arrested 3 people who charged immigrants thousands for false promises of expedited processing. Federal investigators. That was my answer. But I needed evidence, solid, undeniable proof that would stand up to scrutiny, and I needed to gather it without Darren realizing what I was doing. The next morning, I arrived early and pulled the center's annual reports for the past 5 years. Official client numbers had steadily increased, while staff had decreased. Government grants had grown, yet program expenses had somehow shrunk. The math didn't add up, but the discrepancies were subtle enough that an auditor might miss them without knowing where to look. I created a separate email account at the public library that evening and sent a message to the FBI's public tip line, explaining my concerns in general terms. Their automated response was discouraging. Thousands of tips received weekly. Many never investigated due to limited resources. I needed something more concrete than financial inconsistencies. I needed witnesses. Over the next week, I began a careful dance. During the day, I was the model employee, efficiently handling cases, training my replacement, a nervous young man named Zeke, who seemed genuinely committed to helping immigrants, and never staying late. But during lunch breaks and after hours, I became a detective. I started frequenting a coffee shop near the bus stop where many of our clients waited for transportation. Pretending to read or work on my laptop, I would make small talk, building relationships. When clients recognized me from the center, I'd mention that I was leaving soon and ask about their experiences. Most gave vague, positive responses, but occasionally I'd see a flicker of something else: hesitation, fear, or anger quickly masked. Those were the ones I focused on. Tarek, a Syrian refugee who'd come through the center 6 months earlier, eventually opened up after our 3rd coincidental meeting. "He said my family's case was complicated," Tarek whispered, looking around nervously. "That for $3,000, he could guarantee our asylum approval. We sold everything to pay him. 3 months later, we received notice of a hearing. When I asked him why it wasn't approved as promised, he said there were unexpected complications and needed another $2,000. Did you pay?" I asked gently. Tarek stared into his coffee. "My daughter has diabetes. We can't risk being sent back. There's no insulin in our hometown now." By the end of my 2nd week of investigation, I had conversations with 7 clients who'd paid Darren for services that should have been free. But conversations weren't enough. I needed documentation. I couldn't risk copying anything from the center's systems. Darren was tech-savvy enough to track digital footprints. Instead, I memorized details, names, dates, amounts, file numbers, and recorded them in an encrypted app on my personal phone each night. As my termination date approached, I grew increasingly anxious. My evidence was still circumstantial at best. Then, unexpectedly, Zeke provided an opportunity. "I found something weird," he said quietly as we ate lunch in the park across from the center. "I was entering client notes, and there are these gaps in the records, like client meetings with no documentation of what happened." I kept my expression neutral. The system can be glitchy. Sometimes notes don't save properly. That's what I thought at first. But it's only certain appointments, ones with Darren, and only with clients from countries on the restricted immigration list. Zeke was sharper than I'd given him credit for. "Be careful mentioning that," I warned. "Administrative oversights are taken very seriously." His eyes widened slightly at my tone. "You know something." I hesitated, then made a calculated risk. "What would you do if you suspected something unethical was happening at the center?" "Report it, obviously," he said without hesitation. "To whom?" That gave him pause. I'm not sure. Darren's the director." "Exactly. And the board trusts him implicitly." Understanding dawned on his face. "Is that why you're leaving? You found something?" I neither confirmed nor denied, but my silence was answer enough. "I want to help," he said quietly. "It could be dangerous," I warned. "My parents came here as refugees. This center is supposed to help people like them, not exploit them." Zeke became my inside man. While I continued gathering testimonials from former clients, he carefully documented irregularities without raising suspicion. 2 days before my last day, he texted me, "Dee has 3 special appointments tomorrow afternoon, all recent asylum applicants from Venezuela." This was my chance. I contacted 3 clients I'd built relationships with: Tarek, Imani, and Luis. Smeeded paid Darren's special fees. Each had been afraid to come forward alone, but together, they found courage. They agreed to meet with a federal agent I'd finally connected with through persistent follow-ups to my initial tip. Agent Kishi was skeptical at first, but the consistent pattern in my evidence convinced her to investigate. "We need more than testimonials," she explained. "We need to catch him in the act." The plan was simple but risky. The 3 clients would wear wires and meet with Darren during my final day, expressing concerns about their cases and recording any improper demands for payment. Agent Kishi would monitor from a van parked nearby. The morning of my last day arrived with a thunderstorm that matched my churning emotions. What if something went wrong? What if Darren suspected a trap? What if the clients backed out? I arrived early, soaked from the rain despite my umbrella. The center was quiet, most staff delayed by the storm. I used the time to send one final encrypted message to Agent Kishi confirming the plan, then deleted the app from my phone. When Darren arrived, he barely acknowledged me. Throughout the morning, I processed paperwork mechanically, saying goodbye to colleagues who expressed generic regret at my departure. By lunchtime, my nerves were frayed. Tarek arrived at 1 p.m., looking terrified but determined. I pretended not to notice him as Darren escorted him to the private meeting room rather than his office, a deviation from routine that made my stomach clench. Had he suspected something? At 1:45, Imani arrived with her young daughter. Again, Darren intercepted them before they reached the reception desk. I watched from my peripheral vision as he guided them not to the meeting room, but toward the building's rear exit. Something was wrong. This wasn't the plan. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Abort. He's moving meetings off-site. K." My heart sank. Months of work. Ruined. Without recordings of Darren explicitly demanding money, we had nothing concrete enough for charges. At 2:30, Darren returned alone, looking satisfied. When he spotted me watching, his expression hardened. That's when he called the impromptu farewell gathering in the break room, culminating in his public suggestion that I never show my face again. As I sat on that park bench watching the center, defeat threatened to overwhelm me. Agent Kishi approached, sitting beside me without acknowledging my presence. "It's over," I whispered. He changed the routine. He must have suspected something. Actually, she replied quietly, this might work in our favor. He took them to the coffee shop next door, which happens to be within our surveillance perimeter. And that public humiliation you just experienced? Excellent motive for a disgruntled employee story. I didn't understand until she explained further. The investigation hadn't begun with my tip at all. The FBI had been watching Darren for months as part of a larger investigation into immigration fraud. My evidence had simply accelerated their timeline and provided insider confirmation. We have enough for a warrant now, she said, standing. Your clients are safe. We'll move within the hour. What about me? I asked. Go home. You've done your part. We'll contact you if we need testimony. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I needed to see it through. So I waited, pretending to browse job listings on my phone while my future hung in the balance. 1 hour passed. Then, 90 minutes. I watched Tarek exit the center quickly, head down, walking briskly away. Had the operation failed? Just as I was about to give up, 3 unmarked vehicles pulled up to the center. Agents emerged, moving with purposeful efficiency toward the entrance. My heart hammered as they disappeared inside. The next 30 minutes stretched endlessly. Staff began exiting the building, looking confused. Clients were escorted out separately, some being interviewed by agents on the sidewalk. Then, the front doors opened again. 2 agents emerged with Darren between them, hands cuffed behind his back. His expression of shocked outrage was visible even from across the street. As they guided him toward a waiting vehicle, his gaze swept the area and locked onto me. I didn't hide. I didn't look away. I simply raised my coffee cup in a small toast, his face contorted with rage as the realization hit him. I wasn't just a nosy employee. I was the reason his empire was crumbling. As they placed him in the vehicle, a weight lifted from my shoulders. But this wasn't just about my vindication. It was about Tarek's daughter getting insulin without her family going bankrupt. It was about Imani's asylum case being fairly reviewed. It was about restoring the center to its original mission. Agent Kishi approached me again as the vehicles pulled away. Nice work, Ms. Acharya. We found enough evidence in his office to put him away for a long time. Multiple counts of fraud, extortion, even evidence of bribery of immigration officials. What happens to the center now? I asked, my main concern being the vulnerable clients who depended on its services. That's not up to us. But given the circumstances, I imagine there will be quite a reorganization. She was right. 2 weeks later, I received a call from the center's board chair, Vivienne. We had no idea, she said, her voice tight with what sounded like genuine distress. Darren presented perfect reports. Our audits showed nothing unusual. He was careful, I acknowledged. We'd like you to come back, Mira, with a promotion. We need someone with your integrity to help rebuild trust. The offer was tempting. For a moment, I imagined returning triumphant, implementing changes, reshaping the center into what it was meant to be. But then I pictured walking through those same doors every morning, sitting at the same desk where I'd plotted against Darren, using the same systems he'd corrupted. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I think the center needs a completely fresh start. Vivienne sounded disappointed but understanding. The door remains open if you change your mind. Instead, I volunteered to help with the transition, training new staff and rebuilding client trust without officially rejoining. In the evenings, I started teaching citizenship preparation classes at the community college, finding satisfaction in directly helping immigrants navigate their path to becoming Americans. 3 months after Darren's arrest, federal prosecutors contacted me. They needed my testimony for his trial. He's claiming ignorance. The assistant prosecutor, Ren, explained during our preparation meeting, says he had no knowledge of the payments, that someone else must have been collecting money from clients. That's absurd, I replied. I heard him directly solicit payments. Your testimony will be crucial, Ren said, but be prepared. His defense will try to paint you as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. The irony wasn't lost on me. Isn't that exactly what I am? Ren smiled thinly. The difference is, you're telling the truth. The trial was scheduled for spring, 6 months away. In the meantime, life developed a new rhythm. My citizenship classes grew popular. with many students bringing friends and family members. I consulted for several immigrant advocacy organizations, helping them strengthen their ethical oversight practices. Occasionally, I'd run into former clients from the center who would update me on their cases, most progressing more smoothly now that corrupt barriers had been removed. One evening after class, I found Tariq waiting outside my classroom. "Miss Mira," he said, extending a small gift bag. "My daughter and I wanted to thank you." Inside was a hand-knitted scarf and a crayon drawing of what appeared to be me standing beside a little girl. Hero was written across the top in a child's uneven lettering. "I'm not," I began. "You are to us," he interrupted firmly. "The new people at the center reviewed our case. We received asylum approval last week. No extra payments, no threats." Moments like these made the hardships worthwhile. But as Darren's trial approached, my anxiety grew. My testimony would be public. His wealthy friends would hear every detail. I'd made powerful enemies by exposing his scheme. Agent Kishi called a week before the trial. "We need to talk," she said, her voice unusually tight. "Not over the phone." We met at a diner halfway between my apartment and the federal building. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. "The case is more complicated than we initially thought," she said after ordering coffee. Darren wasn't acting alone. My stomach dropped. The board members? Some of them, yes, but also officials within the immigration system. "We've uncovered a network that extends into multiple agencies. What does that mean for the trial?" Kishi stirred her coffee slowly. "Darren's attorneys have approached us about a deal." "A deal?" The word tasted bitter. After everything he did to those families? "He's offering names, dates, bank accounts, evidence against 12 other conspirators, including 2 immigration judges and a senior official at Homeland Security." I understood the implications immediately. "In exchange for leniency," she nodded grimly. "The prosecutor wanted you to know before you read it in the papers. Your testimony may not be needed if he pleads to reduce charges." The justice I'd imagined, Darren behind bars for decades, his victims vindicated in open court, evaporated. So he gets a slap on the wrist while those families are still dealing with the consequences of his actions. "He'll serve time," Kishi assured me. "Just not as much as we'd hoped. And he'll forfeit all assets gained through the scheme. That money will go toward a restitution fund for victims." I left our meeting feeling hollow. The system I'd trusted to deliver justice was making compromises I couldn't stomach. That night, I barely slept, turning over alternatives in my mind. By morning, I'd made a decision. I called Zeke, who had remained at the center through the transition and become a trusted ally. "I need access to the client database, just for a few hours." There was a pause. "That's not exactly by the book, Mira. Neither was what happened to those families." Another pause. "Saturday morning. The interim director will be at a conference. I'll be handling the weekend shift alone." On Saturday, I arrived early. Zeke let me in through the side entrance and set me up at a workstation in the resource library. 2 hours, he said nervously. "That's all I can give you before the volunteers arrive." It was enough. I wasn't copying files or stealing information. I was creating a map, contact information, case statuses, all clients who had interactions with Darren during his special appointments. Over the next 3 weeks, I contacted every person on my list. Many were reluctant to speak at first, fear of immigration consequences overriding their sense of injustice. But as news of Darren's plea deal spread, anger began to replace fear. "He pays a fine and spends 2 years in minimum security," Luis said during our meeting at a community garden where he volunteered. "While my brother remains in detention because of false information Darren provided to authorities." Similar stories emerged across my interviews. It wasn't just the money Darren had extorted. He had deliberately complicated cases when clients couldn't pay, falsified information, and in some instances, created problems that hadn't existed before. With permission from 43 former clients, I compiled their stories into a comprehensive document, not just accounts of financial exploitation, but the human cost of Darren's actions. Children separated from parents, medical treatments delayed, educations interrupted, lives derailed. I took this document to 3 places: the Federal Prosecutor's Office, the State Bar Association's Ethics Committee, and a journalist named Prisha who specialized in immigration issues. "This won't change his plea deal," Wren warned when I handed over the file. "That's already been approved by the judge." "I understand," I replied, "but it should be part of the official record." The Bar Association was more receptive. Darren had been an attorney before becoming the center's director, and ethical violations could result in disbarment, a punishment that would follow him long after his prison term ended. Prisha, the journalist, reviewed the document for 5 days before contacting me. "This is extensive," she said when we met at her office. "But publishing means these people would have to go on record. Are they prepared for that level of exposure?" "They've each signed consent forms," I explained. "They understand the risks. They're tired of hiding." The story broke 2 days before Darren's sentencing hearing. Betrayal of trust. Immigrant advocate exploited vulnerable clients ran across the front page of the city's largest newspaper. Prisha had done a masterful job, weaving individual stories into a damning narrative of systematic exploitation. Television news picked it up immediately. By evening, national outlets were running segments featuring interviews with victims brave enough to speak on camera. Public outrage was swift and overwhelming. Protesters gathered outside the federal courthouse. Immigration advocacy groups released statements condemning the lenient plea deal. The governor called for a state-level investigation into similar programs. The morning of the sentencing, I arrived at the courthouse to find it surrounded by media vans and demonstrators carrying signs with phrases like "Justice for Immigrants" and "No Deals for Predators." Inside, the courtroom was packed. I sat in the back, anonymous among the crowd. Darren entered wearing an expensive suit, flanked by attorneys. He looked confident until he turned and saw the gallery filled with his former clients. His step faltered momentarily. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Judge Amara Okafor was known for her no-nonsense approach and meticulous attention to detail. She reviewed the plea agreement with an impassive expression, occasionally making notes. "Before I accept this agreement," she said finally, "I want to address some new information that has come to my attention." She held up a copy of Prisha's article. 43 victims have come forward with detailed accounts that go far beyond the charges in this plea. While I understand the value of Mr. Blackwood's cooperation against co-conspirators, I cannot ignore the extent of harm documented here. Darren's attorney rose quickly. "Your Honor, those allegations haven't been verified or tested in court. The agreement was made in good faith." "The agreement," Judge Okafor interrupted, "is a recommendation to the court, not a binding contract. And in light of these testimonials, I find it insufficient." She turned her gaze directly to Darren. "Mr. Blackwood, you used your position of trust to exploit vulnerable individuals seeking help. You didn't simply take their money. You actively damaged their immigration cases when they couldn't pay, placing families at risk of separation and deportation." While the judge closed the file, "I am rejecting this plea agreement as not in the interest of justice. The defendant may either withdraw his guilty plea and proceed to trial on all original charges, or accept sentencing at the court's discretion without the benefit of the government's recommendation." Darren's face drained of color. His attorney requested a recess to confer. When court reconvened an hour later, Darren looked defeated. His attorney announced that he would maintain his guilty plea, but without the agreement's sentencing provisions. Judge Okafor nodded. "Very well. I hereby sentence the defendant to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Additionally, the court orders full restitution to all identified victims, and I am recommending to the Bar Association that disbarment proceedings be initiated immediately." The gallery remained silent as Darren was led away. Outside, reporters swarmed around victims willing to speak, capturing their reactions to the unexpected outcome. I slipped away unnoticed, walking the 6 blocks to the community college, where my citizenship class would begin in an hour. My phone buzzed with messages: Zeke, Agent Kishi, Prisha, all wanting to discuss the sentencing. I'd respond later. For now, I needed to process what had happened. The revenge I'd initially sought watching Darren led away in handcuffs had been just the beginning. The true victory was in reclaiming the narrative, in giving voice to those who had been silenced, in ensuring that the full scope of his crimes couldn't be buried in a convenient plea deal. As I prepared my classroom for the evening's lesson on civic responsibilities, Tarek arrived early with his daughter. "We saw the news," he said simply. "You did this." I shook my head. "You all did this, by being brave enough to tell your stories. But you gave us the platform," he insisted. "You could have walked away after he was arrested." His daughter tugged at his hand. "Papa, show her." Tarek smiled and removed an envelope from his pocket. "My daughter received this yesterday." Inside was a citizenship appointment notice. After years in limbo, their case was moving forward. As more students arrived, many mentioned the sentencing or showed me similar notices of progress in their cases. The system, flawed as it was correcting itself. Not perfectly, not completely, but meaningfully. That evening, as I taught about the rights and responsibilities of American citizenship, I felt a sense of closure. Darren had wanted me to disappear, to slink away in shame. Instead, I had become more visible than ever, advocating for the very people he had tried to exploit. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't what you do to your enemy, but what you build from the ashes they leave behind. In my case, it was a community of empowered immigrants who would never again be silenced by fear. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience. Have you ever stood up against corruption or helped someone find their voice? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else to take that crucial first step toward justice. Remember, change often begins with one person brave enough to speak truth to power. I gripped my tablet tighter as Devin leaned forward, cutting me off mid-sentence for the 17th time that afternoon. "What Autumn is trying to say," he interjected with that practice confidence, "is that our user acquisition costs need adjusting. But let's table the specifics for now." The room hummed with murmurs of agreement. Not one person acknowledged what had just happened. Again, I'd spent 3 weeks refining these projections. 3 weeks of late nights, skipped meals, and database deep dives to identify the exact financial strategy that could save this sinking company. Yet my findings remained unheard. Beneath my presentation notes, I added another tally mark: 17 interruptions in 90 minutes. My male colleagues? 0. When our CEO announced our 80 million investor would join next week's call, I made a decision. I reviewed state laws that night. Single-party consent, legal to record. The next morning, I arrived early, placed my phone on the table, started the recording app, and waited. What happened in that meeting changed everything. Not just for me, but for every woman who'd ever been talked over in a boardroom. Before I share the full story, I want you to know that what you're about to hear isn't just about revenge. It's about justice in a system designed to silence voices like mine. If you've ever been interrupted, overlooked, or had your ideas attributed to someone else, you'll understand why this matters. Stay until the end, because the way this unfolded shocked everyone involved, including me. My name is Autumn Kelly. I'm a financial strategist with a master's in economics and 10 years of experience turning struggling companies into profit machines. My previous venture netted investors triple their initial stake through my revenue diversification model. I don't just understand numbers, I see patterns others miss. 6 months before that fateful recorded meeting, I was recruited to join a promising tech startup called DataStream. They developed AI-powered analytics tools for mid-sized businesses, and while their product was exceptional, their financial strategy was a disaster, burning through seed money, missing revenue targets, and repeatedly pushing back their Series B funding round. Their CEO, Ellis Grant, convinced me to join with promises of autonomy and impact. "Your expertise is exactly what we need," he'd said during our interview. "We want you to completely revamp our approach to monetization." I believed him. I left a secure position to take this risk because I saw DataStream's potential. The first few weeks seemed promising. People listened during my onboarding period, took notes when I identified inefficiencies, nodded along to my initial observations. That changed the moment I moved from theoretical advice to implementation. The first time I presented a comprehensive strategy in the weekly leadership meeting, I noticed something odd. Every time I reached a crucial point, someone would interject. Let's circle back to that. We should prioritize more immediate concerns. That's interesting, but perhaps too ambitious for our current phase. At first, I questioned myself. Was I being unclear? Not assertive enough? Presenting too much information at once? I adjusted my approach, simplified my presentations, practiced my delivery. Nothing changed. 3 months in, I started documenting every interruption in meetings. The pattern emerged with disturbing clarity. While my male colleagues averaged 0 to 2 interruptions per presentation, mine consistently hit double digits. The most frequent interrupters: Devin Marsh, Marketing Director, Wyatt Jennings, CTO, and occasionally Ellis himself. What made it more frustrating was watching them implement fragments of my strategies piecemeal, often after one of them repackaged my idea weeks later. The company was still struggling, using only portions of the comprehensive approach I'd designed. I tried addressing it directly. After one particularly frustrating meeting, I approached Devin. I noticed you interrupted my presentation several times today, I said, keeping my tone professional. I'd appreciate the chance to finish my points before opening for discussion. Devin's expression shifted to confusion, then dismissive amusement. Did I? I don't think so. I was just trying to keep us on schedule. These meetings tend to run long. Yet 30 minutes earlier, he'd spent 15 uninterrupted minutes discussing marketing concepts that had little connection to our quarterly objectives. I tried different approaches, speaking louder, sending materials beforehand, asking Ellis for designated presentation time. Nothing worked. In fact, the interruptions increased. The breaking point came during my quarterly forecast presentation. After 17 interruptions, not one person in that room had heard my complete analysis. The projections I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting were dismissed without proper consideration. We were 3 weeks away from our final pitch to secure $80 million in funding, money the company desperately needed, and the leadership team was ignoring critical financial insights. That night, I couldn't sleep. DataStream had potential, but without proper financial strategy, it would collapse within months. This wasn't just about my frustration anymore. It was about the company's survival and the livelihoods of our 67 employees. I researched recording laws in our state, confirming single-party consent was legal. I didn't plan to share the recording publicly. I just needed evidence. Something concrete to demonstrate the pattern when I finally addressed the issue with Ellis or the board. The next morning, our conference room buzzed with nervous energy. The $80 million investment would either save us or, if lost, effectively end the company. Ellis straightened his tie repeatedly, while others rehearsed talking points. When our investor Preston Hall's face appeared on the video call, introductions began. Preston was known for his directness and impatience with inefficiency. His venture capital firm had backed some of the most successful tech companies in the past decade. At 62, he had silver hair and penetrating gray eyes that seemed to evaluate everything. "Let's get started," he said after brief pleasantries. "I've reviewed your previous materials, but I want to hear where things stand today." Ellis gave his standard company overview, followed by Wyatt's product development update. Both spoke uninterrupted. Then Ellis introduced me. "And now Autumn will give us a brief financial overview." I opened my presentation, conscious of the recording app running on my phone. "Thank you. I've prepared an analysis of our current financial position and projections based on the strategy implementation I've been developing." I made it through 3 slides when Devin leaned forward. "Sorry to cut in, but your projection seems optimistic considering last quarter's performance. We should probably focus on more conservative estimates." I nodded and continued. 2 minutes later, Wyatt interrupted. "I think we should address the technical infrastructure costs before discussing revenue streams. Those numbers won't make sense otherwise." Again, I acknowledged him and tried to continue. I was approaching the most crucial part of my presentation, the part that would make or break our funding case, when our product director Nolan attempted the 3rd interruption. If I could just add something about our user growth that might impact these numbers. Then, something unexpected happened. Preston cleared his throat. "I notice a pattern developing here." The room went silent. Your financial strategist has been interrupted 3 times in under 10 minutes. I've been counting. His gaze swept across everyone's faces on the video call. Reminds me of our previous meetings. This is exactly why we're reconsidering our position with DataStream. No one breathed. Ellis paled visibly. When organizations silence their most valuable voices, they miss critical insights. Preston continued. I specifically requested Ms. Kelly's involvement in these meetings after learning she was the architect behind TechVent's remarkable turnaround last year. That's why I was concerned when she barely spoke during our last 2 calls. My heart pounded as I realized what was happening. Preston continued. I'd like to hear Ms. Kelly's complete financial strategy without interruption. And afterward, I'd like to understand why this pattern of silencing exists at DataStream. Ellis stammered. Of course, absolutely. Please continue, Autumn. For the next 20 minutes, I presented my complete financial strategy for the first time. I outlined the inefficiencies in our current model, the targeted changes needed, and the projected outcomes. I explained how we could triple revenue within 18 months while cutting operational costs by 23%. When I finished, Preston nodded thoughtfully. That's precisely the kind of strategic thinking I expected. Now, Ellis, would you care to explain why this is the first time I'm hearing this comprehensive approach? Miss Kelly has been with you for 6 months. Ellis struggled to form a response. We've been implementing elements of Autumn's strategy progressively. There are many voices to consider. And some voices apparently matter more than others. Preston interrupted. Here's my position. DataStream has excellent technology but deeply flawed leadership dynamics. I'm prepared to offer the full $80 million investment, with conditions. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited. First, Ms. Kelly becomes Chief Strategy Officer with direct reporting to me, not filtered through your current structure. Second, your leadership team undergoes communication and inclusion training with quarterly assessments. Third, you implement her full strategy as presented today, not piecemeal. Ellis nodded rapidly, relief washing over his face at the prospect of securing the funding. We can absolutely accommodate those conditions. I'm not finished, Preston said. I'm also appointing Miss Kelly to our advisory board. We've needed her perspective across our portfolio. This position comes with its own compensation package, separate from her role at DataStream. I sat stunned. This was beyond anything I could have imagined. Not only validation, but a promotion, direct access to the investor, and an independent role that gave me security regardless of what happened at DataStream. Does that arrangement work for you, Miss Kelly? Preston asked. Finding my voice, I replied, yes. I believe in DataStream's potential, and I'm committed to seeing my strategy successfully implemented. Excellent. My team will draw up the paperwork. I expect it signed by end of day tomorrow. Preston's tone left no room for negotiation. After the call ended, the conference room remained silent. Ellis finally spoke, his voice strained. Autumn, congratulations on your promotion. We'll need to discuss the transition of your responsibilities. Devin and Wyatt couldn't meet my eyes. The recording device on my phone was still running, capturing every awkward second of the aftermath. I gathered my materials while avoiding eye contact with everyone. The atmosphere was thick with tension and unspoken accusations. As I walked out, I could hear urgent whispers behind me. Back in my office, I closed the door and took my first full breath in what felt like hours. My phone buzzed with an email from Preston's assistant, requesting a private meeting the following morning. This was really happening. Ellis knocked on my door 30 minutes later, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more cautious. Do you have a moment? He asked. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Of course. He sat down, smoothing his tie repeatedly. I want to apologize for any miscommunications that may have occurred during your time here. We value your contributions enormously. Thank you, I replied, keeping my expression neutral. I appreciate that. I'm curious, he said, leaning forward slightly. Was this something you discussed with Preston before the meeting? I met his gaze directly. No, I was as surprised as everyone else. He nodded slowly, clearly processing this information. And the recording device on your phone during the meeting. My heartbeat quickened. He'd noticed. Single-party consent is legal in this state, Ellis. I've been documenting the interruption pattern for months with no acknowledgement. The recording was for my personal reference. His eyes widened slightly. I see. Are you planning to use this recording in some way? That depends entirely on what happens next, I said calmly. I came to DataStream because I believe in its potential. I still do, but I need the space to implement the strategies I was hired to create. Ellis nodded again, standing up. You'll have your new contract by tomorrow. And Autumn, I really am sorry. After he left, I sat in silence, processing everything that had happened. This wasn't how I'd planned my career trajectory. I'd never wanted power through ultimatums or external intervention. I'd simply wanted to be heard. My phone buzzed again, a text from Phoebe, my closest friend outside work. How did the big meeting go? I texted back. You won't believe it. Wine tonight? I need to process. At my apartment that evening, I recounted everything to Phoebe as we shared a bottle of Cabernet. I didn't plan for any of this, I concluded. I just wanted evidence of what was happening. Phoebe, a litigation attorney who'd faced her own battles with workplace dynamics, shook her head. You didn't create this situation, Autumn. They did. Preston just recognized what was happening and valued your work enough to intervene. But now I have to go back and lead people who resent me. Or, she countered, you get to reshape a company culture while having the protection of the primary investor. Do you know how rare that opportunity is? I sipped my wine thoughtfully. I keep thinking about the recording. Part of me wants to delete it now that it's served its purpose. Another part thinks I should keep it as insurance. Keep it, Phoebe said without hesitation. Not to use as a weapon, but as protection. You're about to make significant changes that will disrupt established power structures. Some people won't accept that gracefully. The next morning, I met with Preston via video conference. In daylight, away from the tension of the previous meeting, I could better appreciate his shrewd intelligence. Ms. Kelly, may I call you Autumn? He began. Of course. I want to be transparent about yesterday, he said. Your interruptions weren't the only reason we were reconsidering our investment. I waited, curious. For 3 months, we've been evaluating DataStream's leadership culture. Ellis is brilliant at product vision, but has created an echo chamber that rewards confidence over competence. When we learned they'd hired you, the strategist behind TechVent's remarkable turnaround, we were optimistic. But in subsequent meetings, we noticed you were consistently sidelined. You were testing them, I realized aloud. Preston nodded. We needed to see if they would utilize your expertise effectively. They failed that test repeatedly. Yesterday's meeting simply confirmed what we already suspected. Why not just withdraw your investment? Because DataStream's technology is exceptional, and now it has you. He leaned forward. I don't make decisions based on social justice, Autumn. I make them based on return on investment. Companies that silence their best thinkers make poor financial decisions. It's that simple. By the end of the day, I had signed both contracts, CSO at DataStream with a substantial raise and equity package, plus a position on Preston's advisory board at triple my previous consulting rate. The following Monday, Ellis called an all-hands meeting to announce the investment and my promotion. The news was framed entirely as positive organizational development, no mention of the conditions that prompted it. Some staff members seemed genuinely pleased. Others, particularly Devin and Wyatt, maintained tight smiles throughout. After the announcement, I outlined the strategic changes we would implement immediately. These adjustments may feel significant, but they're necessary for our growth and sustainability. I explained. I'll be meeting with each department individually to discuss how these changes affect your specific areas. The real work began that afternoon. I started with the marketing department, Devin's territory. I arrived at the conference room to find him already seated with his team, his expression carefully neutral. Thank you for making time for this, I began, distributing materials. I want to discuss how the new strategy affects marketing priorities and budget allocations. Devin cleared his throat. Before we start, I think it's important to acknowledge that some of these changes may disrupt campaigns we've already invested in. You're absolutely right, I replied. That's why we're having this conversation. I need to understand what's in progress before finalizing departmental targets. For the next hour, I listened more than I spoke. I noted current projects, team concerns, and potential resistance points. When Devin attempted to dismiss certain changes as unrealistic or too aggressive, I asked specific questions that required detailed responses rather than generalizations. Can you help me understand which specific metrics make you believe this target is unrealistic? Or, what additional resources would make this timeline feasible? By meeting's end, Devin's team was engaged and offering constructive suggestions, while he sat increasingly quiet. As people filed out, he remained seated. "This feels personal, Autumn," he said once we were alone. I met his gaze steadily. "It's not personal, Devin. It's strategic. The company needs to change course to survive, and marketing plays a crucial role in that pivot." "You recorded that meeting, didn't you?" "With Preston." I neither confirmed nor denied it. "What matters now is moving forward. I value your expertise and need your department fully aligned with our new direction. Are you willing to partner on this?" He studied me for a long moment before nodding once. "I'll align with the strategy." Similar conversations played out across departments over the following days. Some embraced the changes enthusiastically, others accepted them reluctantly. Wyatt proved particularly resistant, questioning every technical allocation in the new budget. During our third heated discussion about development resources, he finally erupted. "This is ridiculous. You're dismantling systems that took years to build because you got lucky with one investor who happens to like you." The room fell silent as his words hung in the air. "Is that what you think happened, Wyatt? That I got lucky?" I asked quietly. "You know what I mean," he said, not backing down. "Preston took a shine to you, and suddenly you're dictating everything." I opened my laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet. "Let me show you something." I turned the screen toward him. "These are the development costs for the past 18 months mapped against customer acquisition and retention. We're spending 43% more than industry standard to maintain features that less than 7% of our users regularly access." I clicked to the next tab. "Here's the impact of redirecting those resources toward the features our highest value customers actually use daily. Projected revenue increase of 28% within 6 months with decreased development overhead." Wyatt stared at the numbers, his objections faltering. "This isn't about Preston taking a shine to me," I continued. "It's about implementing data-driven decisions that were ignored for months. You're a brilliant technical mind, Wyatt. I need that brilliance focused on the right priorities." The resistance didn't disappear overnight, but it gradually transformed into grudging respect as my strategy began showing results. By the end of the first quarter under the new approach, customer retention had improved by 16%, acquisition costs had decreased by 22%, and our runway had extended significantly. Ellis, to his credit, became an unexpected ally. During our weekly check-ins, he actively sought my input and publicly supported my decisions. After one particularly successful product launch, he stopped by my office. "I was wrong about you," he said simply. "Or rather, I was right initially when I recruited you, then wrong when I failed to listen." "Thank you for acknowledging that," I replied. "The board is impressed with our progress. They've mentioned expanding your role further." He hesitated. "I wanted you to hear it from me first." 6 months after that recorded meeting, DataStream had transformed. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving. The company culture had shifted too. Meeting protocols now included designated presentation time, free from interruptions, and the leadership team had expanded to include more diverse voices. Devin eventually became a strong partner in implementing our marketing strategy, though our relationship remained strictly professional. Wyatt took longer to adapt, but ultimately thrived when given clear technical direction aligned with business goals. As for me, my dual roles as CSO and advisory board member opened doors I hadn't anticipated. Other companies in Preston's portfolio sought my consultation. Industry publications requested interviews about our turnaround strategy. I was invited to speak at conferences about financial leadership. The recording that started everything remained securely stored but unused. Its existence had served its purpose without ever needing to be played. The true vindication came during our annual investor meeting. Exactly 1 year after that pivotal recorded call, I presented our results to a room of stakeholders, including Preston and several new potential investors. Under Autumn's strategic direction, Ellis explained, DataStream has increased revenue by 67% year over year, while decreasing operational costs by 31%. Our customer base has grown by 43%, with improved retention metrics across all segments. Preston nodded approvingly as I walked through the details. When I finished, he addressed the room. When we invested in DataStream, we were investing in potential. Today, we're seeing that potential realized through clear strategic vision and disciplined execution. He turned to me. Ms. Kelly has demonstrated what happens when companies amplify their best voices rather than silencing them. After the meeting, Preston pulled me aside. I've been watching your work across our portfolio companies. The advisory role has been valuable, but I think we can do more. What did you have in mind? I asked. We're launching a new fund focused on undervalued companies with strong technical foundations but flawed strategic execution. Exactly the profile you excel with. I'd like you to consider joining as a managing partner. The offer was unexpected and life-changing. Partnership in a venture capital fund with significant carry percentage and decision-making authority. This would mean leaving DataStream, I said, processing the implications. Eventually, yes. Though we'd want you to transition gradually and perhaps maintain an advisory role, Ellis has grown considerably as a leader under your influence. I thought about the journey of the past year, from being repeatedly silenced to being offered a position where companies would actively seek my voice, from counting interruptions to shaping investment strategies for multiple organizations. I'd like to think about it, I told Preston. Of course, take the time you need. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing the offer details. My phone buzzed with a text from Phoebe. Heard through the grapevine, your meeting went well today. Celebration dinner? As we shared a meal at our favorite restaurant, I explained Preston's offer. So you'd be his equal in this new fund? She asked. A junior partner initially, but yes, with clear path to equal standing based on performance metrics. Phoebe raised her glass. To the woman who turned 17 interruptions into a venture capital partnership, I knew you were brilliant, but even I didn't see this coming. I clinked my glass against hers. Neither did I. I just wanted to be heard. And now everyone's listening, she said with a smile. The following week, I accepted Preston's offer with a 12-month transition plan for DataStream. When I announced my eventual departure to the leadership team, the reaction spoke volumes about how much had changed. Ellis expressed genuine disappointment but supported my decision. Devin acknowledged how much he'd learned working under my strategy. Even Wyatt offered congratulations, noting that the technical infrastructure changes had positioned the company for long-term success. In my final week at DataStream, before transitioning to my advisory role, Ellis organized a company celebration of our successful year. During his speech, he said something that resonated deeply. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can do as leaders is recognize when we need to listen instead of speak. Autumn taught us that lesson, and DataStream is stronger for it. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, I found myself alone in the conference room where that fateful recorded meeting had taken place. I took out my phone and located the audio file that had never been played, my finger hovering over the delete button. After a moment's reflection, I pressed delete, then confirmation. The evidence was no longer necessary. The results spoke for themselves. As I stepped into my new role at the venture fund, I carried with me the most valuable lesson from my DataStream experience. True power isn't about silencing others or raising your voice the loudest. It's about creating environments where every valuable voice can be heard. In the 2 years since, our fund has invested in 27 companies, with particular focus on those with diverse leadership teams. Our returns have consistently outperformed industry averages. It turns out that funding companies that listen to all their best minds is not just ethically sound, it's financially shrewd. I still have the notebook where I tallied those 17 interruptions. It sits on my desk as a reminder of where this journey began. Sometimes when evaluating a potential investment, I observe their meeting dynamics, watching for who speaks and who gets silenced. It's become one of our most reliable indicators of a company's potential. The recording may be gone, but its impact remains in my career, in data streams transformed culture, and in every investment decision I now influence. That's the thing about finding your voice. Once you truly have it, you never need to prove it was silenced. If you've ever been interrupted, overlooked, or had your ideas attributed to someone else, I hope this story reminds you that your voice matters. Your ideas deserve to be heard completely, not just in fragments between interruptions. Have you experienced something similar in your workplace? What strategies helped you navigate it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else currently struggling to be heard. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more stories about workplace dynamics and professional growth. Every like helps this reach someone who might need to hear it today. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't speaking louder, but documenting carefully. Your evidence becomes your advocate when you finally get the chance to be heard.